set them straight. So the production tax credit versus the investment tax credit. The production tax credit is taken over 10 years. For wind power, it's 2.1 cents per kilowatt hour produced over that 10-year period. The investment tax credit is 30% of the cost basis of the project. And that's taken once in the year that the project is placed in service. Production tax credit, you can see the different facilities that are availed of this. Big thing that we see is in the wind industry. This is commonly used. You see biomass geothermal. Production tax credit, the rules are, I'm just going to go through a couple of these. Key thing that the taxpayer has to own the facility and produce electricity. So this is one of the reasons why in the wind industry everybody uses what's called a partnership flip, because you can't use a sale leaseback. Typically, the way a sale leaseback works is developer sells the property to investor, and the investor leases back the equipment. Well, the rule here is that the owner of the equipment, which is the investor, has to own the equipment and actually be the one producing the electricity. If you do a sale leaseback, the developer is the one producing the electricity. Let's see, let's go to the next one. The investment tax credit, again, it's a 30% credit. You get it in the year that you place the project in service. Carry it back 1 year, you could carry it forward 20 years. One of the key things is that it has to be used in the trade or business. So this means that I can't put solar on top of my home and get the investment tax credit. There's actually another tax credit for that for personal property. But in this space, you're going to see 3 different models with respect to this trade or business requirement. Either you're using the equipment on top of your roof to help you operate your business. 2, third-party financier is financing the transaction and entering into either a power purchase agreement with you or leasing the equipment to you as well. Taxpayer has to be the original user. That just means that you can't go and buy used equipment. There's an exception where that used equipment can be less than 20% of your project components. Big issue here is that the person who gets the credit is the owner of the project on the place in service date. Place in service date is critical, and that means that the date that the project is ready for its intended use. So pretty much, it doesn't mean that you have to actually be using it, it's just the fact that you could be using the project. There is a recapture period on the investment tax credit. This vests each year, so between it's 20% per year. So when you're in after your third year, you're looking at a 60% recapture. And so what would recapture be? It would be a situation where you sell the project to someone else. The ownership entity that owns the project, the ownership in that entity is sold to someone else, where you have a change of more than 1/3 ownership. Let's see. Another issue is there's a reduction of the depreciable basis. So on a $10 million project, you're looking at a $3 million investment tax credit. But the way the tax code works is that the depreciation deductions aren't $10 million. It gets ratcheted down by half of the credit. So on a $10 million project, you're looking at about $8.5 million of depreciation deductions. And as part of the ARROW legislation, there's no reduction for subsidized energy financing. So state or local programs that help finance a project, you don't have to reduce your depreciable basis. And then there's the ability to lease the project to someone else and pass through the investment tax credit. And that is there are 3 structures that are commonly employed when you try to monetize the tax credits, and then the third one I'm going to talk about, which is called the lease pass-through. The American Recovery and Reinvestment Act It provided a lot of relief in the wind industry because projects that could only use the production tax credit were allowed now to make an irrevocable election and use the investment tax credit. Big difference because instead of taking tax credits over a 10-year period based on production of electricity, you are instead taking tax credits based on 30% of your equipment costs. So this election is extremely helpful for situations where you have a high-cost project with low output. But in the end, when in the wind industry, folks will just run the numbers to see, which one is better for them. And by using the investment tax credit in the wind industry, that availed those folks of being able to use the sale-leaseback model. The other thing that the ERA legislation did is it provided a cash grant. So because we've been dealing with this financial crisis where a lot of these Wall Street financial institutions don't need tax credits because they're sitting with a ton of net operating losses, and a lot of these folks who were common investors in the industry, such as Lehman Brothers, disappeared, Congress thought that it would be helpful to provide a limited period of time where folks didn't have to go out and monetize the tax benefits. So they provided this 30% cash grant, which basically says that if you were to be able to use or be able to have these tax credits, you don't have to go out and monetize them. You could fill out an application, send it to Department of Treasury, and receive a check within 60 days in the amount of the tax credits. So the cash grant is the same as the tax credit. It's 30% of the depreciable basis. It's in order to get the cash grant, project has to be placed in service in either 2009 or 2010 this year, so it ends at the end of this year. Or construction has to begin by the end of this year. And there's a safe harbor for what does that mean to have construction beginning. And it means that physical work of a significant nature has begun. And so there's a safe harbor, so how do you determine what is significant work, physical work of a significant nature. There's a safe harbor that says that as long as you have incurred 5% of your total cost of the property, that you will be availed of having this thing placed in service with respect to the cash grant. But that doesn't include the land, it doesn't include preliminary activities. 5 minutes? Okay. So the key thing here is you want to make sure that you've got about 10% of your costs incurred by the end of this year, because it is a hard and fast rule. I'm going to skip through the next one, but one of the things that's required is there's a ton of documentation. And Treasury has two options when you send in your application. One, they can reject your application and give you 21 days to complete whatever is missing. Or two, they can just deny your application, and there's no appeal. So we're dealing with a number of folks who have come to us. They did their own applications and were denied, and they weren't given a 21-day period. So we pick up 1 or 2 clients a week that have had this problem. Again, there's a recapture, just like the investment tax credit. The one thing that's different than the investment tax credit is that you can sell the property to an eligible participant. You can sell the property to an eligible participant and not have a recapture event, as long as the buyer enters into an agreement with the seller that says that they will be jointly liable for any recapture. Let me just go into who are eligible participants or who aren't, who are ineligible participants. Tax-exempt organizations, governments, foreign persons where what the following is not true, that more than 50% of their income is subject to U.S. taxation. It is based on 30% of the depreciable basis for tangible property, so that doesn't include real estate, and it doesn't include property that's not subject to depreciation.